Hello, my name is Michelle Herzog. I'm the History Social Science Consultant here at the Los Angeles County Office of Education and the Director of the California Democracy School Civic Learning Initiative.
And my name is Ryan Stow. I work with Michelle as the California Democracy School Civic Learning Coach.
We want to welcome you to Module 4 of this professional development series designed to provide educators with the knowledge, skills, and resources to implement high-quality civic learning in classrooms to prepare all students for college, career, and civic life in the 21st century. The entire series can be found at www.laco.edu/California Democracy School. Modules 1 and 2 focused on the urgent need for civic learning and provided an overview of the California Democracy School Initiative. We also described the 5 components of high-quality civic learning: inquiry, investigation, civil dialogue, communicating conclusions, and taking informed action. Module 3 focused on strategies to frame a civic inquiry. Once that's done, it's time to move forward to conduct an investigation, to gather and analyze information to respond to the civic inquiry. In this module, we'll provide you with information, tips, and resources to help students develop and implement an investigation. We'll also show you what it looks like in the classroom by observing Martha Chacon, fabulous teacher at Santa Monica High School. She's going to facilitate the process with her students, and we'll get to watch. Today's objective is for participants to learn how to engage students in a civic investigation, to gather and analyze information, to respond to the civic inquiry that'll address an authentic problem by taking informed civic action. You can't be informed if you don't understand the issue inside and out, the pros and cons of the various reasons and solutions. And that's what this module is about: how to help students investigate an issue thoroughly. During today's webcast, we'll examine the criteria for conducting an exemplary civic investigation, see what it looks like in a classroom, and take some time to think about facilitating one in your own classroom. So let's dive in by looking at 2 tools we've created for your use: the California Democracy School Civic Inquiry Investigation Rubric and the Classroom Observation Tool. You'll notice they both have the same content information, they're just formatted a little differently, and hopefully it'll be useful to you to clarify what we mean by exemplary civic learning. So take a moment now to download these 2 tools so you can refer to them during the webcast. Now, before we focus on the civic investigation portion, let's take a moment to review the 5 components to understand where the investigation falls in the process. Ryan, can you just quickly review the 5 components for us, please?
Sure. The California Democracy School Civic Inquiry and Investigation Model, adapted from a number of excellent civic learning programs, includes 5 key components. First, the process begins with a civic inquiry about a public problem or issue, usually driven by student interests and teachers' curricular goals. In Module 3, you can learn more about how an inquiry is constructed and how it needs to be framed to spark investigation, civil dialogue, and eventually civic action. The second step the investigation calls for is students to investigate and research information regarding the issue raised through the civic inquiry. Third, from there, armed with data and information from multiple perspectives, students engage in civil dialogue in order to further explore the pro and con arguments of the causes of the problem raised and the effects of different solutions. Fourth, students are then charged with reaching a conclusion or even multiple conclusions. They begin to think of ways to communicate and respond to the issue raised. Finally, we want students to take informed action, to engage in democratic practices, to achieve long-term solutions to actual real-world problems.
Let's dig down a little and look carefully at the criteria for an exemplary investigation. It should compel students to develop or respond to their inquiry, and they're both compelling and supporting questions. A good investigation should compel students to delve into content areas to apply disciplinary knowledge and concepts. That's where students can acquire deep content knowledge that's important for them. Focus on a variety of perspectives or points of view from traditional but also non-traditional sources, including centers of power and influence. It should compel students to seek out evidence from multiple sources. This is really important because we want students to contemplate a variety of points of views they may agree with and views they may not. The investigation should engage all students in opportunities to evaluate sources, analyze information, and make conclusions. It needs to be intentionally targeted to respond to that inquiry and be careful not to digress from the topic. It's easy to do that when you're doing research. It should intentionally develop those creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking skills. And also, hopefully, will require the use of technology or digital media.
There are a number of ways students can collect information. Here are just a few: media research, interviews, surveys, or observations and experiences. We are going to see Martha Chacon at Santa Monica High School as she guides her students through the investigative process. You can download her lesson plan and the tools she created to use in your classroom. Documents include interview skills worksheet on steps to create a great survey, and a worksheet on investigation. Take a moment to download these items before viewing the classroom video.
Ryan, would you guide us through this piece? Give us a glimpse of what we're going to look at.
At Santa Monica High School, all 9th grade students are required to enroll in a freshman one-semester seminar course. This is where the school has institutionalized civic learning, so every student will participate in this experience. Leading up to the civic inquiry and investigation, Martha engaged her students in a study of the American eugenics movement. Most associate the eugenics movement with Nazi Germany, but it was also practiced in the United States prior to World War II as a method of preserving and improving the dominant groups in the population. After this study, students were asked to come up with topics around this issue in modern society. Are there examples of groups, ideas, or movements that are dominant over others today? Not surprisingly, students express interest in addressing a number of issues, many of which are controversial. Racial inequality, gender inequality, treatment of people with disabilities, and lack of access to fine arts education were just a few. You can see how Martha guided them through this process by watching Module 3. Once the topics and civic inquiries were established, students were ready to conduct research to investigate the information and issues surrounding their civic inquiries. This is what we are going to see in the video. Martha will begin by setting the stage by introducing the task. She offers students 4 options or strategies for researching their topic. They can do media research, they can do an interview, survey other students, or even perform an observation and experience. You will see her explain the particulars of each strategy. Students are asked to regroup according to the strategy they chose and work as teams to brainstorm ideas for collecting information. Then they will return to their original groups based on the topics they are investigating to pull their plan together.
So at this point, you guys have all decided on a civic inquiry question that you're going to be working on. So you've already done the first stage. Now the second stage is the investigation portion. And there are 4 ways to do investigation: through traditional media research, through interviews, through surveys, and through observation and experience. So the question that you already came up with is somehow tied to some sort of informed civic action. It's also really relevant to your lives, it's specific, it's manageable, it's authentic, and it's going to allow you to create those collaborative skills as well as those research skills. So to be able to do that, you guys already had a library orientation in which you guys looked at the different databases that were available to you. You learned the difference between just looking at Google, right, and actually looking at journals that are peer-reviewed. There are other ways that you could do media research, right? It's stuff that you readily find at your local library, or you can find through the internet. What are these types of medias? Newspapers, magazines and journals, books. You could even look at like radio shows, documentaries, and of course your databases like your e-library and your SIRS. Interviews are a great way to get information about your particular topic. Yesterday we identified community partners that are working on the same causes that we're working on. So there are ways to conduct interviews. The first thing I'm going to tell you, you guys are all under 18. Never ever conduct an interview by yourselves, okay? Always go with somebody else and try to do it in a public place. So the first thing you do in preparation for your interview is make sure you research. You don't want to show up to your interview unprepared, not knowing what you're asking, or asking a question that is already, the information is already available. call the person, contact them, ask them if they're willing to be interviewed. You can do that via email, via phone, say please, be courteous, say thank you. And then come up with at least 15 questions that you can ask your interviewee. Come prepared and on time, okay? And always bring something to write with. If you are going to record the interview, make sure that you ask for permission to record the interview before you do so. And then give them plenty of time to answer their questions. You might ask them a question and they might pause, say, let me think about that. Don't get nervous, right? Just let them have the time to think about their answer. And then make sure you tell them what the purpose of this interview is, what you're going to do with their information. As soon as the interview is over, make sure you review all your notes. You don't want the person to leave and say, oh, I wish I would have asked them this, okay? And then as soon as possible, send them a thank you note. A handwritten note is the best thing to do, but if you can't, then an email thank you will suffice, okay? So when doing a survey, it's a little different than an interview. An interview question, you kind of want it to be open-ended. You want the person you're interviewing to talk a lot and tell you a lot of information. For surveys, it's not really helpful. So you really have to think of what is the purpose of your survey, what are the types of questions that you're going to be asking, how are you going to send out your survey, right? And then who's going to help you collect that data and analyze it. So make sure you have an objective for your survey. Who are you targeting? Who's your audience? What do you want to find out? You want to make it short. You don't want to make it too long. And then how will you use this data? What decisions do you hope to impact with the results of the survey? And then what types of questions are you going to ask? Yes, no questions are great. Ranking scales are great. Make sure you keep the ranking consistent though, from lowest to highest or from highest to lowest. Multiple choice questions are fine. There is a possibility that you might offer an other, right, option. They could bubble in other, but then give them a spot to actually write in the other. And then avoid these open-ended questions unless you really have time to analyze the data. You want to keep your survey from 6 to 10 minutes. Research says that after 10 minutes, people just lose interest. So think about how are you going to get that survey out? Are you going to use Google surveys? Are you going to use SurveyMonkey? Are you going to do it via social media? Are you going to tell them what your timeline is? I need this back in 5 minutes, 5 days. You know, how quickly do you want the information back? And then always send reminders. If you're going to do it in a classroom, I am more than willing to contact teachers to make sure that you can go into the classroom, but I need to approve the survey, okay? And then who is going to analyze that data? Some of you guys said you know students that are in statistics that can help you with the analysis of that data. Here's a sample survey that we did a few years ago, and it was just to get the perception of just water on campus, right? They wanted to know whether kids really knew that there was a water issue, whether they were saving water or not. It's simple, straightforward, really easy to tally and get information from. Okay. The last one is your personal observation and experience. This is something that teenagers don't normally think is really valuable, but you guys have been places, you can go places, you can research a lot of things, and you can use your own personal experience to gather information. So at your tables, you're going to think about, like, where can I go? What do I need to research? Some groups yesterday came up with some really great ideas. And then how are you going to keep track? Are you going to tally? We talked about how Heal the Bay tallies every time you do a beach cleanup. They tally like how many cigarette butts, how much plastic. You have to keep track of that. And then that's the protocol that you use. And here are some examples of things that you can do to gather data, right? You can visit your local watershed. You can go to schools. You can go to the beach and the parks. So any of those areas will work, okay?
I like the way she really guided the students to look at different forms of information in different places. You know, most times nowadays kids go straight to the internet or straight to their phone.
It's not just about looking for different points of view on a topic, but accessing information in many different ways. Interviews, surveys, and observations all have value, and the tools she references along with her PowerPoint can be found on our website where you found this webcast. Let's see how Martha now sets them up to brainstorm ideas. We want you to pay attention to the information they will collect, but also where they will find the information.
So now within your groups, you have your survey group, your interview group, your observation and experience group, your media research. You're all seated by investigation strategy, but different topics. So as you go around, you're going to kind of brainstorm ideas about what it is that you are going to research within the survey group, within the interview, within the observations and experience.
Well, my topic was on women's rights in sports. So I went to the Olympic sports page, and I found data and statistics on as to how many women's sports there were and how many competed, and the percentage of which, how many games were just for women throughout the years from 1900 to 2014.
I found like a couple like feminist organizations, like their websites. So I was looking on those about like the same topic, women's rights in sports.
So like I looked up on YouTube and like
Interviews and stuff.
yeah, and looked up on like people that did interviews on like police brutality and all that stuff.
Okay. So I have been using like not magazines, but like newspaper websites. So on LA Weekly, I found some really good articles about police brutality that's happening like in our community, and as well as LA Times. So.
Okay. So, who wants to go first?
I think I already have a place that I want to interview.
Well, what's your topic first?
My civic inquiry question is, what can we do to change the way girls are perceived in schools? And there's the CS Self-Worth Foundation, and they help promote equality and empowerment for young girls, and that would kind of go hand in hand. So.
You could also check out the YWCA.
Yeah, I also read up on them, and also I looked into Planned Parenthood a little, because I know they do things actually more than just pregnancy and issues like that. They actually help with also empowerment.
I used to go to the YWCA, and they really work on like empowering girls and telling you that you're worth more than what society might put in play for what they actually think you can do and what you can actually do. So,
Mind over matter. Okay, so, so for the fine arts, I have a few places to go. Of course, the Ed Foundation, they're what supports the fine arts throughout our district, so that's probably my number one priority. And then also just little tiny nonprofit organizations like Sola Music Ensemble, the Alexander Traeger Foundation, stuff like that, and then maybe the Newman Foundation as well. But like I could also do some profitable organizations, but I'm not sure about profitable organizations because they're kind of different.
Yeah.
I would say Colburn School they're kind of like a college though. So I was just thinking, would that work? If I'm thinking of school district.
I feel like nonprofit is a better route to go.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. Just making sure.
And I think that like some music shops also help with helping schools, so I think you could look into that too.
Okay, cool.
my topic is racial inequality, and I was thinking of interviewing some of the teachers on campus or some people or officers part of SMPD, so I could kind of get a gauge on what their take is on the racial inequality in Santa Monica, or what teachers have witnessed in schools, on the yard or wherever, what they've seen in classrooms, what the district is doing. I want to see what I can do to try to prevent as much inequality as possible.
So do you mean on campus only? Or because what about like the NAACP or the SMPD?
I mean, yeah, we could do that. I was
Branch
just
out.
thinking about what we could actually change inside of school, because this is
Oh, yeah,
our
in
environment
school,
and
yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah. And then we both have microaggressions. We have the same topic. And Ms. Chacon mentioned that we could interview Mr. Webb. He's a teacher on his campus, and he does like a whole semester on like microaggressions and how it affects people and like what it is, since a lot of people don't know. So
It's not really a topic that's like talked about.
yeah, that's like what we're like focusing on. Yeah, so we just learned what that was like when this thing started.
Yeah.
What questions do you have?
So, all right, some more questions I have about women's rights in sports is things such as like, do girls deserve equal treatment as guys? And so I would explain, since it's just a survey, it's just yes or no, but I would explain like, or ask like why don't they get enough, or stuff like that. Like, should like the attendance at like women's sports events be more money so that it could go to the actual players or teams? and because a lot of the time men are getting paid more, so it's
Right.
like that.
I feel like sponsors could go into your topic too. Like, why do specific sponsors only sponsor men's sports and like women's sports? But it would be kind of hard to do that in a survey too. Do you have any other questions that you were thinking about asking?
Yeah, one question that I have is on a scale of 1 to 5, like how included are the disabled students in class discussions and why? And then another one that I wrote is like how are disabled students treated in other classrooms, like with average students?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sorry, what's your topic?
Disabilities. And
Oh, yeah.
My topic is like education in the fine arts at schools.
Mine is women's rights in schools and education.
Yeah, and mine's disabilities and inequity in the workplace.
So, I mean, I guess we should be coming up with ideas where we can observe or either like places where we experience either of these topics. So, like for me, I could observe like how some different relationships are perceived in the media, like in commercials and stuff. Yeah, so like there's just like different ideas that we could do for each topic.
Yeah, like actually that idea could be used for like a lot of things. Like for example, like how many like people who are actors are like disabled. Like how many disabled people do you see in commercials every day? Like not a lot. Like
Yeah. For fine arts, I could like go to some schools in like the inner city and like maybe watch like one of their concerts or like review like kind of the music that they're playing, and I can like compare that to the music that people are playing in like our schools.
I could like look at how in the media girls in schools and like education are like shown, and then how that makes girls in schools like feel how they're supposed to.
What I really like is to see the kids working with each other collaboratively to build on each other's experiences, each other's background knowledge, to gather all that information together. It really makes for a richer conversation. I think really builds those collaboration skills too. It's great to see them sharing information.
Right. I agree. At this point, each group, the media group, interview group, survey group, and observation group, stands up and shares their ideas with the entire class. From there, students reconvene into their topic groups and talk about the different strategies they will bring to the work. First, we will see the group focused on the arts in schools, talk about the various strategies they will use. And then we will watch the group that's focused on gender equity in sports share their approaches for investigating their topic.
You're going to get up and just give one kind of really good idea that you guys came up with within, or something that stands out, right? So maybe for the observation group, it was the type of observation you're going to do. In the survey group, is there something interesting that kind of came out of what you were going to do, right?
We've been finding what are the best tools online and in newspapers or magazines as to what we're researching and what's the best and what's the most reliable sources. So what we found is that to our specific topic, which is police brutality, it's best that we're looking in newspaper articles online because it brings it closer to where we are. And in LA Times articles, there are so many different instances of police brutality, so we can gather facts that are in our community, as opposed to stuff that is happening all over the country. So.
Okay. Will you be using the databases to kind of compare studies that have been done?
So what we're doing is we'll be looking at databases, and within those databases there are articles from the LA Times that talk about problems in our community.
So my topic is the fine arts, and the organization that I would be interviewing is the Sola Music Ensemble, or Foundation, and the leader who I would be interviewing is Margaret Lisi. And a few of the questions that I have are: 1, do you believe the fine arts are extracurricular? 2, do you believe that every child should have an opportunity to enjoy the fine arts? And I believe that this person would be really good to interview because she has a lot of experience providing free music education, art education, other things like that to schools that do not have them or have the funding to have them.
Something interesting that came up while we were all talking was I thought of doing 2 different types of surveys. Like, one type would be handing it out to the general public just in different places in our community, and the other would be handing it out to classmates and try to compare and see, you know, what adults think versus what kids think, and like just to see what the difference is between the 2 age groups. Do you feel that fine arts are extracurricular or along the lines of like a class in school? Do you feel like the fine arts is being appreciated enough in school?
While we were all talking about different observations and experiences that we can kind of just observe and experience in our like everyday lives, is one of them that we agreed a lot on is like the media and how it's like different groups are perceived. Like my topic is the stereotyping of relationships, and we discussed that how we could like observe like how different people are perceived in commercials and different relationships, like heteronormalization and stuff like that.
Discussing all 4 areas of investigation and how you are going to move this project forward.
Okay, so we were all at different groups now. So now we have each little element of how we're going to do this project. So I think that we can now mesh it together, just put each part together.
Yeah.
So I'll start. Like an interview person that I would be thinking of is the Ed Foundation. That's just another one that I haven't talked about yet. And I would kind of ask them different questions, like what are the benefits of fine arts? Why do you continue to fund the fine arts? Just things like that, because they've been funding this fine arts program for a long, long time. So not a long time, but for a lot of people.
So besides the Ed Foundation and an outside organization, are you going to maybe consider interviewing a school that didn't have fine arts programs and then got some, and what they did to kind of move that forward?
Yeah, there's this one school, Sands, and they had no music program. It's a religious school, so the only music program they had was like a choir. And then this new principal came in, and so I'll help them, so I could probably go interview the principal and see why he believed that they should have a program.
And, or do you guys have suggestions for somebody else that might be interviewed, something to think about? So you guys can share what you want to have done with the other.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because you do private lessons, right?
Yeah.
You do private lessons, you could ask. Okay.
Why?
You could,
Alright, so
since you do private lessons, you could ask your teacher, like, why do you...
Margaret Lacey.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's go to you two. What did you guys get about surveys?
I got that you should survey high school students, the school board, PTA, teachers, and staff, because that's basically, that's just people who think
Population.
that, yeah, people who think that fine arts is like, if they think fine arts is important or not. And then I think we should conduct the survey online or on paper and pencil or in person, even like after, before, or like during school.
Yeah.
And I think some of my questions are, do you think that fine arts is important to have in schools? Yes or no? Should fine arts be equally thought of as any other subject? Do you find fine arts critical to student education and stuff like that?
So actually, I heard you say up there, like, you were actually onto something, and I think that it was a really good idea what you said about interviewing or surveying the adults for the students, because the students are the ambassadors. The students are the people who will ultimately be saying, maybe I want to do fine arts, maybe I don't.
Right.
So like maybe adults, as we know, will fund a program or two, but I think that it ultimately comes down to the students.
Yeah.
So I think we have to kind of change our standpoint to think of the students are the best ambassadors for themselves. So if we focus on the students' needs rather than another organization's needs, we could probably get more.
Yeah.
It was pretty much what you were saying. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me and Kevin are doing the survey, but I think we have too many questions, so I'm going to be erasing some of the questions that aren't as strong compared to other ones, so that it's not such a long survey.
Okay. So me and Ria were like looking online, and I found some like
feminist organizations and like women's sports foundations that talked about Title IX and how like since it's like they passed it in like in the early 1970s, how like in schools like boys and girls have to have equal like opportunities for sports. So
Yeah, I looked at more statistics and data on how women have played sports internationally in the Olympics, such as how many sports they played, how many women's sports there actually were, and how it's increased from the 1900s to now.
that's cool.
So I did interviews. So I was thinking about doing the volleyball coach and the football coach. So I have questions. So I have 2 questions so far. So I have, what do you think about girls playing in male-dominant sports and why? And then my second question was, do you think sports are too gender specific? So I need like one more question. And I was thinking it'd be cool if we could do the same questions for both coaches and like see how they react differently or like say stuff differently.
We were thinking maybe either sports coaches, but she's already doing that, or like women's, like the sports players that are here at SEMO.
So like give them the survey?
Give them the survey so that they have like experience, like their own experience to compare it to. And we also might do what Isabel suggested, was send it to each, like to different classes, the survey that we made, send it to a class, and their whole class can fill it out so that we have a lot of different opinions.
Yeah, I think it would be good to get like different opinions. So like you could do like the people who like actually play sports, and then just do the general like
the people who like watch or
Yeah.
outsiders. Yeah, it's good.
So what questions do you have that we might need to eliminate? So
Well, some good questions that I had. Well, one of them is, should men and women be playing together on same teams? Should women's sports be promoted and advertised as much as men's? Or like, should it be equal? Yeah, I wish I could explain it more, but you have to keep the survey questions simple. So like, more like yes or no. Should women's sports events be the same price as men's?
for the survey, are we like trying to find out about like how many, like what are we trying to find out by the
I'm
survey?
just trying. Well, it's kind of like the survey's just trying to raise awareness for the issue, and so I'm asking a lot of questions about just the women's, just like the sports, and I don't know. I can't really explain. I don't know. What were you thinking? Like,
Well, I was thinking we could do more about like, trying to get, like, see what people think about the issue and see like how they think we could like change or what's really wrong with
we'll
like
see with the
people.
survey though. They can't really like explain
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
just like
It's
yes
kind of
or no
hard. That's
questions.
why.
Yeah, really rich discussion going on. Each of the groups came up with different sources for information and lots of critical thinking about where to go, what to look for, what to ask. Let's take a moment now and see how the teacher wraps this up and reminds them of the entire process and the next steps they'll take.
At this point, you've had a chance to share and talk about the different strategies and kind of given everybody ideas about who you're going to interview, how you're going to survey, who's going to help with the survey, who's going to help with the interviews, who is going to help contribute with the media research, and that personal observation and experience is really, really valuable. I think it's something that students sometimes don't think that is relevant, but you can, I think as I walked around and saw all the tables, you guys have some really good ideas for gathering that that observation or that data. So the next part, right, because this is stage 2, we did our civic inquiry question, investigation. The next one is going to be civil dialogue. And we're going to be doing a SAC, a structured academic controversy. And that'll happen in January. And then we will talk about communicating conclusions and what that's going to look like. And then finally, we'll start doing our action, which is kind of exciting. I see all of these ideas kind of brewing, right? But you have to make sure that your action fits the actual problem in your community. Okay? So we'll continue working on this all week. Thank you.
That's a terrific example. It's wonderful to see how Ms. Ciccone is guiding discussions, but not leading them. You can see the students really taking ownership over these projects.
I'm thinking about this, however, and the challenge for teachers. How do I guide students to seek out information from different sources that will reflect different points of view? It's important for them to seek out and analyze these different perspectives We know it's easy to tap on sources that you agree with and agree with your perspective, but we want them to go out of their comfort zone and seek out those opposing views, counterclaims, to help them get a full perspective and appreciation of the complexity of the issues that they're tackling. Because unless you fully contemplate all the points of view or perspectives on an issue, you truly can't make a fully informed decision or conclusion. I noticed the young man who spoke about using surveys. He wants to survey people from different age groups. Now that's a great start to getting different perspectives from different groups of people.
Now that we have seen what this can look like in the classroom, let's take some time to reflect on the process. Stop the video to think about the different investigation strategies you saw. What do you see as the benefits? What do you see as some of the challenges?
So now we've seen how you can structure a classroom to facilitate students' ability to gather information. What we haven't discussed much is how do we help students evaluate and determine if the information they gather is accurate, that it's credible, and reliable. When we send students to the internet, this becomes an even bigger challenge. You know, when I was in school, the mantra, although it was a false mantra, was, hey, if it's in the book, it must be true. And nowadays we hear people say, well, if it's on the internet, it must be true. And we know that is a false assumption as well and has the potential to be quite dangerous, lead people in the wrong direction. So it's worth taking the time to guide students through some protocols to help them evaluate whether the information they're gathering is credible and reliable no matter where it comes from. And without a doubt, the leading expert in this field is our good friend Sam Weinberg, who founded the Stanford History Education Group in 2002. I know most social studies teachers are familiar with the Reading Like a Historian work and the many other projects of SHEG you can find at sheg.stanford.edu. Before we go on, take a moment and download the historical thinking chart. We'll spend a few minutes reviewing it and thinking about it as we use it with our civic investigations. Now, even though this resource was originally intended for reading historical texts, primary and secondary sources, the criteria can also be used to evaluate information gathered from the internet, newspapers, surveys, interviews, and even general observations. So for example, sourcing. Wherever information can be found, it's important to question, who wrote this? What's the author's perspective? When was it written? Where was it written? Why was it written? And is it reliable? Why or why not?
Think about the context of the information. When and where was the document created? What was different then? What was the same? How might the circumstances in which the document was created affect its content? The more sources students dig up, the more we want students to corroborate the information found. What do other documents say? Do the documents agree? If not, why? What are other possible documents? What documents are the most reliable?
You're right. And we've been hearing a lot lately on the power of close reading, to read deeply for meaning and even hidden meanings in texts. What claims does the author make, either directly or indirectly? What language does the author use to persuade the document's audience? How does the document's language indicate the author's perspective? Words and language are powerful. So whether your students are searching the web, reading newspapers and periodicals, going to textbooks, interviewing people, making observations, or even drawing on their own experiences to gather information, I think it's worth taking the time to make them aware of potential bias, to seek out those multiple perspectives and critically analyze all the information they can to make an informed, responsible conclusion about a topic or issue. So take a moment to pause the video to think about how you can use this evaluation criteria from the Stanford History Education Group to help your students become critical thinkers and investigators. What do you see as the benefits? What do you see as the challenges? And there's more good news on the way. The Spencer Foundation has tapped researchers at Stanford Graduate School of Education to be part of a $2 million initiative that will create for the first time ways to measure the nature and quality of civic and political discussions among youth, whether face-to-face, in writing, or online. The project is entitled Measuring the Quality of Civic and Political Engagement. It includes 5 research teams at 4 universities. Sam Weinberg, the Margaret Jacks Professor of Education, is Principal Investigator of the Stanford arm, along with Joel Breakstone, Director of the Stanford History Education Group, and GSE doctoral student Sarah McGrew. The Stanford team will be studying how well students discern the credibility of information online with an eye toward improving students' digital media literacy skills. So take a moment and look at this short video that'll give you a preview of the great work that will be conducted soon.
Our project is about how young people make judgments about the information that they encounter online. Increasingly, the source of information and the way that young people learn about the world is through the digital information that they're exposed to. You can look at many young people today, and many of them have never held a physical newspaper. And so we encounter the world through bits and bytes.
My experience as a classroom teacher informs how I approach this project. I don't think we have a solid approach at all in any way to thinking about how we teach kids to evaluate evidence and arguments online and how we assess it.
And so our project is about developing assessments that examine young people's facility with the kind of social and political information that they encounter online, which in many ways is a prerequisite for their ability to make sound judgments as citizens.
These assessments will be tools that teachers can use in their classroom, and we'll do some observing of teachers using them in their classrooms and start to get a better sense of how these things are used, whether they do a good job informing instruction and changing the way that teachers are thinking about their students' skills at assessing evidence and arguments online.
Right now, we can examine and assess how young people deal with a static piece of text. But how they judge the difference between the New York Times as opposed to Gawker or BuzzFeed, those kinds of assessments don't yet exist.
The kids do things like rely on placement in the Google search results as a proxy for credibility. So they think if it comes up first, it must be the most reliable resource, right? Which is pretty terrifying when you start to search for different things online and see what comes up first in the search results.
What used to be the province of subject matter experts or publishers or editors or librarians now falls on the shoulders of each and every one of us.
Because the internet's not going to change, right? They're not going to start only allowing credible information on the internet. So we're the ones that need to change and get better at doing this. And I think we do that by teaching students to do it.
At the time of this broadcast, the work had just begun, so be sure to check their website to learn more at the link below. As we've mentioned, the civic investigation is one of 5 components of a high-quality civic inquiry and investigation experience for students. Other modules go in depth on these different components, and I hope you can find the time to engage with them too. You can find them all at www.laco.edu/California Democracy School. So again, I want to thank you, Ryan, for joining the discussion and helping us put these modules together and supporting all our teachers.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to participating in more in the future.
And there will be more. It's very exciting. We want to again thank Martha Chacon at Santa Monica High School and thank all of you for taking the time and investing your energy into providing all our young people with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to be engaged citizens in the 21st century. Thank you.